Hey, I'm back to talk to you about books. But today we're actually not even going to talk about real books, but hypothetical ones. Because I think we've all had that one book that was really intriguing in its premise, but when we read it, we just had some problem with the writing or the execution in general, and we thought that, oh my god, what if insert author that I like had written this book that I just read? He would have done it so much better. And that's what I want to explore today. Because today we're basically going to do a video where I basically ask the question, what if insert book was written by X author? And for that reason, I have created two new spinner wheels. One of them is showing a bunch of authors that I have at least read two books from, and that I think I can quantify their writing style to something that I actually recognize and could possibly have the effects on another book on, extrapolate that. And I also have in the other spinner wheel a bunch of books whose plots I actually really intimately remember and can think of how they would have been changed by another author's influence. So yeah, I hope you will enjoy this video, and with that, why don't we get into it? So for our first spin, we basically have if The Foxwife by Yongzi Chu was written by Stephen King. Okay, so what would I change about the story? Obviously, The Foxwife, if you didn't know, is about this fox spirit who is in search of the killer of her daughter. I think with changes from a Stephen King perspective, we definitely would have to make it horror, which the original book isn't. It's more a fantasy book. Um, because that horror is Stephen King's bread and butter, obviously. And I do think that we could actually retain one of the original perspectives because there is also the perspective of a private detective. I think if Stephen King had a stab at that story, we would have this older male character who plays the detective. He would be the main perspective, and he would actually follow the lead to investigate this case about these people dying from these mysterious illnesses where they basically are, their bodies are pristine, they have no signs of illnesses, but they're just their life has suddenly vanished, which is a condition that comes up in the original book. It is not inflicted by the original fox spirit, but it definitely could be in Stephen King's version of the story, because we would have to make the protagonist of the original book, Fox Spirit, to be much less benevolent, I think. And yeah, I think that would really work. And so we would have this detective guy who is investigating these murders, and they're all these murders at this very weird supernatural case, and it would eventually lead them to the fox spirits, which need to consume this life energy to live, but it would probably be a more malicious version of the fox spirit in Stephen King's tales. Obviously, I don't think Stephen King would actually take on the story, but I think that would be what I think he would do with that story. Okay, so for our second spin, we have What If Old Country by Matt and Harrison Query was written by Michael Crichton. So if you didn't know, Old Country is about this couple. The man is a war veteran, and they move into this valley because they want to just get away from civilization, because he is dealing with PTSD and he just want to be somewhere quiet and everything. And this valley, it seems really, really idyllic and everything. But then they find out that there's something wrong about the valley, or basically every season there is this kind of haunting that comes. It's season specific, and they need to make a specific ritual to let it go away, or something very, very bad will happen. What would I change if Michael Crichton had written this story? Obviously, Michael Crichton is not writing really in any supernatural capacity. He's more of a scientific thriller guy. I would probably make the protagonist a scientist, as a lot of his protagonists are. I would probably ditch the original couple, and the groundwork I would keep from the original book would probably be just the haunted valley, because I don't really know, and also I don't really know if I would make it haunted, since it is probably has to be more grounded in a Michael Crichton book. But I think it has to be about the scientist who gets sent to this supposedly haunted valley where these strange occurrences have been observed, and he must find out what is going on there. It could also form around a team of scientists, as a team of scientists would probably be more likely for a government operation, which Michael Crichton's books often do form around these government operations. So that could also be the case, and they just have to find out what is actually happening there. What is actually happening there, I don't really know, but it has to be some like more scientific explanation for these hauntings. I don't know if there's like maybe some natural gases emerging that make everyone hallucinate. Maybe there's like alien influence. I don't think he's beyond that, so maybe that. But yeah, I think that would be the basic premise for what Michael Crichton would do with a book like Old Country. So for our third spin, we have What If the Ring by Koichi Suzuki was actually written by Alma Kotsu. Actually, I think this one is kind of difficult because I don't really know how Alma Kotsu would approach this story. But the original Ring is basically about this reporter guy who finds out about this strange case of people dying in like heart attacks, and he doesn't originally think that they're connected, but then he finds out that they are connected through this videotape. And if you have seen the Ring movie, you basically know what like the rest of the premise is, that yeah, the videotape is haunted and everything. And Alma Kotsu's take, I would probably say we're gonna make it historical. I know that she's not just writing historical anymore and has been trying to branch out into more contemporary stuff, especially with her last release, which was Fiend. And I think her new release is also like more modern. I think it's called Incarnate. I have pre-ordered it, but I don't really remember. And so, but I still think this would really work in the like the historical sense, especially with how tied to the like videotapes the Ring is. But I think here we would do a like generational story on how this like Ring curse haunts maybe a group of people or maybe a family throughout the ages. We could explore the origins of the Ring curse and how it maybe has ended up on the videotape, how it would affect the people throughout this time, the different people in this family or whatever group you might choose to put in there. And then we could maybe also even do a segment in the modern day, even like breaching into her modern horror stuff and how it would maybe affect people in the modern day. Is there like a online version of the Ring? I know that there's probably movies that have explored that, and I don't know how well they did it, but I think it would be worth doing, and I think this would really play to Alma Kotsu's strength, because I like the way she writes her historical stuff, and maybe this kind of character dynamics and like a timeline and this kind of curse affecting this group of people throughout this timeline, maybe this would really suit her. Again, this one is probably one of my more vague ideas because I don't really have an idea what she would actually do with it. Not that I have any idea what any of these authors do with it, but like with some I have more of a firm grasp. This one is more of a loose guess, but I think this would be a good idea. Next spin, we have What If the Woman in Black by Susan Hill was actually written by Ali Hazelwood. This one is also interesting because if you don't know what The Woman in Black is about, it's about this lawyer who is ordered by his boss to go to this very far off town and go to this woman's funeral, and after the funeral go to her house that is laying out in the marshes to go over her papers and basically like look if there's any will written or maybe what has to be done with her event like fortune or just the things she owns. And when he arrives there, he like gets to know that the people have a absolute fear of this house. And yeah, it is a ghost story, and I think it would be probably very difficult to translate it to Ali Hazelwood style. It is a very bleak, a very atmospheric story, and as much as I love Ali Hazelwood, she's like not really an atmosphere writer. She's just like very quirky. What would I do with this? I think we definitely have to change the male character because Ali Hazelwood has like always like women main characters. So we could just make it a female lawyer. Has probably the same job to do as the male lawyer in the original story. She has to go to this funeral of this woman. I think we have to give her a companion from the village, since Ali Hazelwood does write romances. Maybe it could be like this adversarial kind of relationship, because Ali Hazelwood writes enemies to lovers really well. So maybe they originally do not want to help her with the sorting out of Mrs. Drablow's papers because of the local legends that they fear the house. But then through working with the lawyer character, they would probably eventually fall in love, because it's custom for Ellie Hazelwood characters that way. And obviously we have to bring the like ghost of the woman in black in there in some way. And I think we should just keep it like in the original story, that she is haunting this house, but it's just not like haunting the one character, but the two characters that are working on the papers. And through like surviving against this ghost, they would eventually fall in love. I don't think that is something that Ellie Hazelwood would actually write, but I would actually probably like her to, since her dip into paranormal romance with Bride was something I very much enjoyed. So I don't think this is too bad of an idea, and I think it's like a good concept for what she would do with like the bones of this story. This is gonna get a little bit difficult because I have a lot of romance authors left for some reason, but this is What If Wolfsong by TJ Klune was written by Guilt Pleasure. So Guilt Pleasure is the authors Toga Q and Kikichoneko that wrote the Indies Bird series. And Wolfsong is obviously about this boy, and he lives alone by the woods with his mother. But one day there is a family of very enigmatic people that move into the house at the end of the street, and he is really taken in by them, and he has this like second family there, and it's this really cute story, and obviously there's rebels involved. What do I think Guilt Pleasure would eventually like do with it? So their stories are dark and include a lot of smut. The first Wolfsong book is not that, so I definitely think they would have to change a lot there. There is dark elements in Wolfsong because there is like this evil kind of guy coming for them, and they're not like really fleeing from them, but like they are definitely searching for some kind of sanctuary. And so yeah, I think we could maybe play the threat up a bit more, and there would probably be a lot more smut scenes. So they would probably have to age up the characters a lot more, since they do start out as teenagers, and probably wouldn't really like include smut scenes with those. Also, I think the story would definitely include drawings, because Guilt Pleasure is a, I don't know how you say that word, like Joshin creator duo, and they do manga. And so I definitely think they would do that as well. And I think we could like leave a lot of the story intact. We just, there would probably be more character death. There is character death in Wolfsong, but it would probably hit a lot harder and be a lot more played up dramatically. And the characters would probably do a lot of intimacy and like response and like trauma response to that for some reason. I don't know if I would want to see that version, just because Wolfsong, in my opinion, is a perfect story, but I do think that this would be like an interesting take, and I think if these authors actually wrote that it would really like kind of turn out that way. So for the next spin, we have What If Mac by Steve Alton was actually written by Michelle Paver. This one is interesting just because it's a complete tonal mismatch. So Mac is obviously about this guy who is like a scientist for sharks or something, or maybe he was something else that I forgot. No, he was a submarine diver. Yeah, I think he was a submarine diver, and he gets sent to the Mariana Trench because the company wants to study something there, and they find out that there's big sharks, megalodons, in the Mariana Trench, and they get out of the Mariana Trench and wreak havoc. And Michelle Paver is a writer of really beautiful atmospheric ghost stories. So that is interesting. I think we would have to change a lot. Michelle Paver has also written other stuff, like my favorite book by her is Wakenhurst, and as well as a lot of like young adult stuff, but I'm not taking that really into consideration here. We're gonna talk about the ghost story Michelle Paver here. And I think we would have to set it in like, we would have like make sweeping changes, obviously. But if we would have to do it, we would probably set it in like this coastal town. She would have to make it like really atmospheric, because that's just what she does very well. It's like small, maybe eerie, but also kind of cozy town, like windswept, and the sea is crashing against the shores everywhere. And because she writes ghost stories, maybe it is about a person that is either like living in that town, or even better, moving back, or just moving to that town. And they probably feel disenchanted with the community there, because they're probably a lot of like really like tight knit folk that aren't really open to a lot of strangers. Maybe they have a house on the cliff. They feel really not welcome there. And in the night, they hear like these eerie howls. And then we have to somehow involve a giant ghost shark into that. Maybe that's what's responsible for the atmosphere, like the misery of this town somehow. Again, this is very vague, because this is just a complete tonal mismatch. I have no idea how you should actually do that. And you could definitely not even like include a single character from the original mag, because I don't think Michelle Paver would ever actually write somebody like that. Because they're just like these brash, like really just action men that just won't fit in a Michelle Paver story like in the slightest. So yeah, this is a very much a mismatch. I have no idea how this would actually turn out, but this is my idea for it. So yeah, this is our second to last spin, and this is What If the Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris was actually written by Faye Quinn. So The Silence of the Lambs was obviously about Clarice Starling, who is trying to hunt down Buffalo Bill, and Derwal has to interview the serial killer Hannibal Lecter, who might have some info about him. And Faye Quinn is a author of very gay romances with a lot of smut. How would I do this? Well, I don't know if Faye Quinn actually writes lesbian books too. But just because I don't know that, we're gonna have to probably make Clarice Starling a man, for some reason. And she also writes a lot of paranormal romance. Again, I don't know if she also does like other things, but I know her for her paranormal romance. So I'm just gonna say we're gonna make Buffalo Bill like a supernatural creature of some sort. I don't know if we could incorporate like his actual things like somehow into that. I know he like skins his victims, so maybe he would kind of be like a skinwalker or something. That could probably also create a bunch of cultural issues, since the skinwalker is a Native American thing that I don't know if Faye Quinn has any like actual knowledge of, or if that would be very culturally insensitive, and I would not want her to do that. But again, this is all hypothetical, so we're just gonna say that Buffalo Bill has to be a supernatural creature. Obviously, there is a lot of things involved with the ethics of a romance around a serial killer, but it has been done before in a lot of dark romances, and also in more comedic tones, like something like Butcher and Blackbird. So I think they would do it here. Again, I don't know if Faye Quinn would actually do it. I don't think so, actually. But this is just what. Again, we're throwing ideas around because that's the concept of video. I realize that the concept of video is stupid. I'm sorry. But like, yeah, that's it. And what else have I have to say about it? I don't know. I don't know how Hannibal Lecter fits in there, but Clarice, or whatever we're gonna call that character, then still probably has to hunt Buffalo Bill down somehow. So we're probably also gonna get him involved in some way. But I do think that the main romance is probably gonna be between Clarice and Buffalo Bill, or maybe they're gonna get like Hannibal Lecter involved somehow. I do not really know, and this concept is very weird, so I'm probably gonna want to move on. And the last spin we have is What If the Deep by Nick Cutter was written by either Douglas Preston and or Lincoln Child. Okay, last one. If you didn't know, Nick Cutter's The Deep is about this guy who goes down. Is it again the Mariana Trench? I'm mentioning the Mariana Trench for the second time in this video, I feel like. Yeah, with Meg. And there is this station down there that is like researching these weird particles, because at the surface there is this illness called the GATS that lets people forget things very rapidly, and they just forget everything, and eventually they just forget how to breathe, and then they die. And so they think that these particles on the bottom of the Mariana Trench may be the key to solving this illness. And he goes down there because there has been an outage and they don't know what is going on down there. So they send him down there because his brother is actually the one leading the experimentation down there. And if you don't know who Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child are, they are probably most well known for being the authors of Relic and the wider Pandagast series, to which they contribute both to as like the both writers of the books, and they also have written individual books in like spin-off series of the Pendergast series, as well as like complete standalones, I think. But I probably know them most from the Pendergast series because I read 2 books from that, as well as I think two standalone Lincoln Charles, which are a spin-off series. What do I think they would do with this? I do think that the original concept of somebody going down to a station in the Mariana Trench can be kept intact. Because I do think that Lincoln Child actually has a book called Deep Storm or something that is somewhat of a similar concept. So I think it's like intact with the science thriller roots. Where it probably goes a little off the rails is with the horror elements that come in, because it's very weird and supernatural. And while I don't think they would shy away from supernaturalism, something in that vein, I do think we would have to have some kind of a little bit more scientific explanation. So maybe these weird particles could actually be of like an earthly origin, or have some kind of explanation that is like, oh, ancient gods. If I just spoiled the book for you, I'm sorry. Who cares about Nick Cutter? I don't. So yeah, we would have probably some actual science explanation for the things, and maybe also bring the illness in a little bit more, because in the original book the illness eventually becomes very obsolete and we don't really hear about it anymore. And I do think that it should be a lot more in the focus of this eventual like Douglas Preston Lincoln Child story. And yeah, having more of an end goal, not making the ending as bleak, but I think we could have definitely kept the original structure intact. So yeah. Anyway, those were 8 books, and I think I've talked a lot more than I anticipated to. And what if those 8 books had been written by other authors? Just my ideas for that. I don't know if I totally failed at this concept or if I didn't. Also, it's really hot again, and it just stormed outside, and I'm thankful that the power didn't go off. I still have to edit this video, so I gotta have to end it here because I don't wanna cut myself off rambling again, and I also want to sleep sometime. My makeup today is crazy, I know, but for some reason I just had wanted to do that today, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you in another video. Bye!